Hello everyone, this is lecture number 3 of our obligations and contracts. This afternoon, we will start the discussion of the different provisions under obligations. In our previous lesson, we defined obligations and contracts. Remember that obligations and contracts is the body of rules which deals with the nature and sources of obligations and the rights and duties arising from agreements and the particular contracts. Now, what is Article 1156 of the Civil Code? Remember that the laws under obligations and contracts are found in our Civil Code, and all we have to do is to go to Google and search RA number 386 and search for Article 1156. Again, Article 1156 will give us the definition or the meaning of obligation. What then is obligation? An obligation is a juridical necessity to give, to do, or not to do. Let us discuss this definition of obligation. An obligation is a juridical necessity to give, to do, or not to do. What is an obligation? It comes from the word obligatio, which means binding. Therefore, kung na kay obligasyon sa isa ka tao, kinahanglan nimo na siya buhaton. Kay binding man na siya. Ang obligation nimo sa isa ka tao, kinahanglan nimo buhaton. When we say obligation, a person is bound to render something in favor of another. Unsa man nimo pagrender or unsaon nimo paghatag ang imong obligasyon. Pwede siya to give a thing, doing a certain act, or not doing a certain act. So for example, muadto ta sa inyong love life. Ikaw boyfriend na kay girlfriend. So na kay obligasyon diha sa imong girlfriend. Unsa man ang imong obligasyon? The boyfriend is bound to render something in favor of another. So unsa man imong ihatag sa imong girlfriend? Pwede siya butang, pwede pod pagbuhat og certain act, or pwede pod dili pagbuhat og certain act. So for example, si boyfriend ay obligasyon kay girlfriend buhatag og butang. So for example, pag anniversary, imuha man ang obligasyon para palipayan imong girlfriend. As a boyfriend, napo kay obligasyon doing a certain act, mao na ang pagiging loyal kay girlfriend. Og napod kay obligasyon not doing a certain act, mao na ang pagpangita og bag-ong girlfriend. That is obligation. Now, let us go to juridical necessity. Ang pagiging boyfriend or girlfriend ay wala po siyang juridical necessity. Anong ibig sabihin ng juridical necessity? In case of non-compliance, there will be legal sanctions. Of course, dili man nimo pwede madimanda ang imuhang boyfriend nga wa siya nihatag sa imong flower. Okay? Because there is no juridical necessity between a boyfriend and a girlfriend. Only an obligation. In case of non-compliance, there will be legal sanctions. Now, let us proceed to the debtor and the creditor. Okay? So, kung manghiram kag kwarta, na ang magintay creditor, na apud tay debtor. The creditor is the person who lends money. Si debtor, ang person nga nanghuram. Sa langto nga pagkaistorya, ang creditor ang nagpautang, si debtor ang nangutang. Usually, si creditor dato, ang debtor pobre, maunang siya nangutang. Another thing, in obligations and contracts, ang balik-balik nga term, dili lang creditor and debtor. There is also another term where we call the creditor obligee, ang debtor obligor. Okay? Kinsa man na si obligee, same lang sa meaning ni creditor. Si obligee ang nagpautang, si obligor ang nangutang. Usually, si obligee dato, si obligor pobre. Now, para dili malibog unsay buhaton, ang nagpahiram og kwarta, pwede nato siya tawagong creditor. Sometimes, ginatawag po siya sa book og obligee. Ang nangutang, ginatawag siya debtor, usahay ginatawag po siya og obligor. So, para dili mo malibog, remember, creditor and obligee pertains to one person. Ang nagpautang, debtor, obligor ang nangutang. Unsaon para makahinumdum, creditor starts with letter C, obligee ends with letter E. Again, si debtor nag-start og D, si obligor nag-end og OR. Now, unsaon paghinumdum? C. Kung muingon gani ang libro og obligee, always remember C. oblige, creditor, creditor, oblige. C, isa ra na siya. Pag malibog mo, kinsa na si obligor, for example, the obligor may now demand. Kinsa gani na si obligor, ma'am? Always remember the word door. Debtor, obligor, debtor nag-start og D, obligor nag-end og OR. So, C, endor. C, creditor, oblige, door, debtor, obligor. Now again, obligation is a juridical relation whereby a person called the creditor may demand from another who is the debtor or nagpautang the observance of a determinate conduct. For example, nagpahiram kag kwarta. What is now the obligation of the debtor? The observance of a determinate conduct. Unsa na nga conduct? Ang pagbayad sa utang. And in case of breach, o kintahay dili ka makabayad sa imong utang, the creditor may obtain satisfaction from the assets of the latter. So, unsay buhaton ni creditor kung di ka kabayad, pwede niya kuhaon ang imong mga butang para lang masatisfy ang imuhang mga utang. Again, obligation is a juridical relation whereby a person called the creditor may demand from another who is called the debtor the observance of a determinate conduct, and in case of breach may obtain satisfaction from the assets of the latter. First, let us take at the different essential requisites of obligation. Unsay requisites? From the word required, requirement. So, kanus ata makaingon nga ang tao na'y obligasyon. First, there must be a creditor. Second, there must be a debtor. Third, there must be an object or the subject matter of the situation. And fourth, there is a juridical tie. Kanus ka makaingon nga naa kay legal obligation diya sa isa ka tao kung ang inyong relationship maka-identify ka kinsa ang creditor, kinsa ang debtor, unsay giutang ug unsay juridical tie. Let us discuss this one by one. Again, what are the requisites of obligation? We have the creditor, the debtor, the object or the subject matter, and the juridical tie. Let us first discuss creditor and debtor. Again, C, door. Creditor, oblige, C. Debtor, obligor, door. Okay? Creditor is an active subject while the debtor is the passive subject. Unsa may pasabot kung active subject o passive subject? An active subject, kinsa man na siya? The person who is entitled to demand the fulfillment of the obligation. Kung nangutang ka nako, ako ang na-right mo ingon nga, hoy, bayari ko. Ikaw maghulat ka kung kanus ako moingon nga mubayad na ka or kung kanus mo abot ang deadline sa imong pagbayad. Again, the creditor is the person who has a right and the debtor is the person who has the duty. Now let us go to the third requisite, the object and the subject matter. Unsa man na? It is the conduct required to be observed by the debtor. Kung nangutang, unsa man ang conduct nga i-observe ni debtor, mao ang pagbayad sa kwarta. Object or subject matter also states that without the prestation, there is nothing to perform. Unsa man ang prestation, mo na siya ang object or subject matter. Kung nangutang ka kay creditor, unya wala man siya gihatag nga kwarta, pasabot ana walay object, walay subject matter, therefore walay obligation. Unsa man imong i-demand kung man ka nagpautang. Ang object or subject matter tells us that we need to give a thing. Pwede pod magbuhat og certain act o pwede pod ang dili pagbuhat sa certain acts. Number 4 is the juridical tie, meaning unsa may source sa imong obligasyon. This is also called the efficient cause and that which binds or connect the parties to the obligation. Now, juridical tie means ang imong legal demand sa isa ka tao. A juridical tie is one that binds or connects the parties to the obligation. The tie in an obligation that can easily be determined by knowing the source of the obligation. So, juridical tie, dira magikan kung unsa man ang source sa imuhang pagdemand. Is it from agreement or from a contract or a legal obligation to support? Now, let us take a look at the different kinds of obligation. So, naatay real obligation and personal obligation. Pag moingon tag real obligation, it consists about giving a thing. So, pag real obligation, paghatag na og butang. Pag personal obligation, obligation to do or not to do. Now, kung moingon tag real obligation, ang subject matter nato kay butang or a thing. Pag mintag personal obligation, the subject matter is an act to be done or not to be done. Pag real obligation, the obligor, kinsa ganina si obligor, si door, obligor, debtor, obligor must deliver. For example, nagpromise ko nga mukanta ko sa fiesta. Okay? Is that a real obligation or personal obligation? That is a personal obligation to do. May magniingon ko nga mohatag kog kwarta sa fiesta. Pag moingon kog mohatag kog kwarta sa fiesta, that is a real obligation, that is my obligation to give money. Pero pag moingon kog mukanta ko sa fiesta, that is my obligation to do a personal obligation. Okay? So for example, in this example, we have Gaya and Tito. Gaya enters into a contract of sale with Tito who paid the purchase of a GE refrigerator. Kini nga case, kinsay nagpalit? Si Tito, ang namaligya si Gaya. Gaya is the passive subject or the debtor. Tito is the creditor or the active subject. Maingon mo, ma'am, wala man nangutang si Tito, ma'am, kay iya mang gipalit. Dili lang automatic nga si creditor ang nagpautang, si debtor ang nangutang. Let us also take a look at the different definition of debtor and creditor. Si creditor ang active subject, si debtor ang passive subject. Now here, Gaya is the passive subject or the debtor and Tito is the active subject or the creditor. Now, what is the object or prestation? Unsa man ang butang nga ilang gipag-istoryahan diri, mao ang GE refrigerator. And the obligation is the legal tie which binds Gaya and Tito. So unsa man ang obligation ni Gaya, ani nga contract, mao ang pag-deliver sa ref dito kang Tito. Tito is the active subject nga naman. Si Tito ang nagkarapatan moingon kay Gaya, hoy Gaya, i-deliver na ako ang ref. Again, who is our creditor? Tito. Our debtor is Gaya. Nga naman, because Tito is the active subject, siya ang nagkarapatan mo demand. Unsa man ang i-deliver? Ang atong obligation diri is a real obligation to deliver the ref to Tito. Another example, kini famous kay ni siya karon si Paulo Contis, di ba? Kabalo man niya, he is a father who left his wife and his children. Kailan mo niya si LJ Reyes, mother who takes care of the children sa mga anak nilang duha ni Paulo. Now, who is our creditor? Who is our debtor? Ang atong creditor is the person, di ba? The active subject, siya ang nagkarapatan mag-demand. So, who is our creditor? Of course, the mother. Who is our debtor? The father. Ang papa nga namiya sa iyang anak. Again, the other term for creditor is obligee. The other term for debtor is obligor. Now, what is our object or the subject matter or the prestation in this case? That is doing a certain act to give financial support to his children. Now, what is the juridical tie or the source of obligation? Pwede ba ka mo ingon lang huy, tagay kong kwarta, kay nakoy anak. Siyempre, dili ka pwede may kanana sa bisag kinsang lalaki. Ang lalaki nga imurang pwede pangayo nagsuporta kay ang papa sa imong mga anak. What then is the juridical tie or the source of obligation? That is the law on persons and family relations. Because the father, no matter how far he is, maski pagpila na kabuok iyang pamilya, has the obligation to financially support his children. Now, when is there conflict in an obligation? There is conflict in an obligation whenever there is a wrong. Na wrong ka, maunang naakay pananagutan. What is a wrong? A wrong is an act or omission of one party in violation of the legal rights of another. Kining kay Paulo o kay LJ Reyes, kanus aman na wrong si Paulo. Na wrong si Paulo sa wala paghatag niya og suporta sa iyang mga anak. That is what we call the wrong. It is an act or omission. Unsay omission? Gi-omit niya ang pagsuporta sa iyang mga anak. Ang pag-omit niya sa pagsuporta sa iyang mga anak is a violation of the legal rights of his children to ask for support from their father. Another example. This is our last example under Article 1156. This example is found on page 18 of your book. Under a building contract. So, kabalo na mo nga ang juridical tie niya is a contract. So, under a building contract, X and Y bound themselves to build a house for the lovebirds for 1 million pesos. Bisayaon nako. Si X ug si Y niingon sila, Huy, lovebirds, akong pinturahan ng inyong balay worth 1 million pesos. Kinsa man ang atong passive subject, kinsa man ang atong debtor. Our passive subject is X and Y. Nganuman, dili man sila ang nagkarapatan mag-demand nga, huy, asa naman yung trabaho. Pero mo mo, ma'am, pwede man po sila maging creditor kung di mo bayad si lovebirds mo na giingon nga na mga obligasyon. Now, kining example, si X and Y, nag-promise man sila nga pinturahan ang balay ni lovebirds. Here, X and Y are our passive subjects, while kining mga lovebirds is our active subject. Unsa man ang atong subject matter. Ani nga case, ang subject matter ani nga case is the building of the house. Unsa man ang atong juridical tie, ang agreement or the contract between the parties. So the contract between the parties is the source of obligation. Now, si lovebirds is our active subject. Sila ang moingon kay X and Y, hoy, humana og pintura ang akong balay kay gusto na ko mo balhin diha. Suppose X ug Y, humana sila og pintura sa balay ni lovebirds. And nag-promise ni sila lovebirds nga bayaran niya si X and Y kung humana. Kinsa naman pod ang atong active subject? Si X na pod ug si Y. X and Y now has the legal right to demand the lovebirds, hoy, humana mig pintura, bayari nami. Okay? That is obligation under Article 1156. Again, Article 1156 speaks of the meaning of obligation. And what does obligation mean? An obligation is a juridical necessity to give, to do, or not to do. Para makaingon ka nga naa kay legal obligation or ang isa ka tawo na obligasyon nimo, always remember the requisites of obligation. There must be a creditor who is the active subject, the debtor who is the passive subject, the object or the subject matter, and the juridical tie which is our legal basis of the obligation.